these are getting harder and harder to guess. But so what's another kind of component when you think about programming language? So we have the spec with implementation. This is mostly it if we think about what we learn in school. So what other stuff could there be to the programming language? If I just said, go write, go write that game or whatever, and I just gave you a C++ compiler, would you be able to do that, or would you need something more? Libraries, good. So what do you mean by that? If you think about just an interpreter compiler, what this will give you is that it just gives you, you can write a for loop, right? So for I don't know, for C or something, you can write a for loop, you can write an if statement, you can write a, int, you can write a float, you can write that stuff. But then what if you want to interface with your operating system? What if you want to manipulate strings? What if you want to, draw graphics and stuff? So you would need these libraries, right? You would need other stuff. So if I just had implementation of language, you can't actually do much more than just do homework assignments, right? You can't do much more than just say here, write a Fibonacci function, or write a Tower of Hanoi, or write, write a math thing that's built in. A key part of any language that doesn't come so far is what's called a standard library. So standard library is actually, you can say that, you can kind of argue it comes with the spec in a way. Some specs say what the standard library is, but a lot of them don't, and they evolve. The standard library is the thing that comes with usually the compiler and the interpreter, but it's a separate package. So a standard library is kind of the set of functions that is really useful that you can call. That's a great point. Yeah, so this is not a requirement, but this is, I would say these are properties of programming languages you probably want to have, right? Yeah, that's great. So I think technically you just need these two.
So addition, right? Plus.
Yeah, so
function. Is that part of the standard library?
I would say that's part of the implementation, because this is baked into the compiler.
Where do you draw the line?
Why?
It depends on your language. So yeah, so if you're in Scheme, for example, everything is so. Yeah, so I would say in Scheme it would probably be part of the standard library, because Scheme just has rules for function application, and plus is just a function. But in other languages, let's say in C++ or whatever, or C, to add numbers you have to do, go like this and 5 times whatever, right? You write this string. So the reason why I would say that for C or C++ of these languages, the addition and multiplication operators are really part of this, is because you need special syntax, right? You need to understand this plus thing and this times thing and these parentheses and stuff. And it's baked into usually the compiler. You have a parser and you have to understand, you have rules for that. And I would say that where you separate the standard library is things that you don't need to bake into the interpreter and compiler. So in a way, in the Scheme kind of philosophy, if you have the less amount of stuff you can bake in here, the better, because your language is more minimal and flexible. So usually standard library comes in the form of functions, or for object-oriented languages, classes. So anything you can write as a function or as a class, you could put in the standard library, because you don't want to put those inside the interpreter itself, because then it's harder to change. Right? The standard library is easier to change than hacking the compiler interpreter itself. But usually these built-in operators, so keywords like if, for, plus, times, braces things, those things are baked into the language itself in the spec and the implementation. One of the properties that makes a language stand out is the quality of its standard library. So I'll use several examples. So Python is a good example of the language that succeeded in large part because it had a really comprehensive standard library. So it's called the Python standard library, and it has a lot of stuff in it. So here are strings, here is different kinds of data structures, heaps, array bisection algorithms, sets, mutexes, queues, dictionaries. There's stuff for dealing with math, accessing files, kind of this lightweight database, compressing data, different file formats, crypto, operating system services, more operating systems, some stuff to deal with more OS stuff, internet stuff, so sending emails, parsing JSON data, decoding data from the internet, HTML, generating HTML, XML, creating web applications, FTP, CGI, all these buzzwords, cookies, multimedia, processing audio, translating different languages, some simple GUI toolkits, some debugging, and other stuff. So this is the Python standard library, and this is some version of it and stuff. And one of the reasons why people enjoy using Python is that when you just install Python, you just say import whatever. Let's say I want to make a program that scrapes data from the web and then packages to email and then sends it to someone. You can just install Python and just say import HTTP, import email, and all of that comes. And it's, again, not part of the language itself. Right? It has nothing to do with Python having colons and stuff. It's just Python provides just a big ton of standard library functions that you can call, and that's convenient. And this is, hopefully well documented and such. Here's an example. Where is this? So Java also has a giant standard library. I would say it's probably less easy to parse and use than the Python one, but it's bigger. So Java has a standard library, Java version 7, and it is giant. I mean, there is a lot of stuff in here. So again, Java, a lot of people like using Java because just by installing Java, you can have access to all these thousands of classes and objects and things. And this is important. Having a good standard library is important, not only for the implementer for you coding, but for also running, right? Because if someone else installs Java on their computer, you know that they can run your program because they will have all of these thousands and thousands of functions built in. So imagine Java or Python without a standard library. You can't do anything more than just writing hello world and doing Fibonacci.